You ever notice how some people look financially successful, but always seem stressed? They have the car everyone notices, the expensive phone, the perfect apartment, the vacations that make everyone stop scrolling for a second. From the outside, it looks like they've figured life out. But then you talk to them for 5 minutes and realize they're exhausted. They're anxious about work, anxious about bills, anxious about losing momentum, and sometimes deeply trapped by the very lifestyle that was supposed to make them feel successful. I think a lot of people are quietly living inside this contradiction, because modern life has blurred the line between looking wealthy and actually becoming wealthy. And those are two very different things. One is about perception. The other is about freedom. But perception is louder. It gets more attention. People notice visible success immediately. Nobody notices financial breathing room. Nobody compliments you for having an emergency fund. Nobody sees the credit card balance you paid off quietly. Nobody applauds the weekends you stayed home instead of spending money trying to keep up socially. Those choices are invisible. But over time, invisible choices shape people's lives far more than visible purchases do. And I think that's where a lot of financial stress begins. Not because people are irresponsible, not because they're lazy, but because we live in a culture where spending often feels emotional before it feels financial. Most people don't buy things only because they need them. They buy things because of what those things represent. A car can represent status. A luxury watch can represent success. A nicer apartment can represent progress. Even something as simple as expensive coffee or designer clothes can quietly become part of how people communicate identity. And honestly, that's normal. Human beings have always used social signals. We want respect. We want belonging. We want evidence that our hard work means something. The problem is that modern consumer culture understands this perfectly. That's why advertisements rarely focus only on products anymore. They focus on identity. A car commercial rarely says, "This car drives well." Instead, it says, "This is who you become when you own this." Confidence, status, freedom, success. And after years of hearing those messages constantly, people slowly start connecting self-worth to visible lifestyle without even realizing it. That's why status spending is so emotionally powerful, because it rarely feels irrational in the moment. It feels justified. You work hard. You're stressed. You want to enjoy your life. You don't want to feel left behind while everyone around you seems to be upgrading. So you upgrade too. A slightly more expensive apartment, a newer car, a bigger television, better clothes. And none of these purchases seem life-changing individually. That's what makes this difficult. Financial pressure usually doesn't arrive dramatically. It accumulates quietly. Monthly payments here, subscriptions there, lifestyle inflation slowly expanding in the background. Then one day, someone looks at their income and wonders why they still feel financially fragile despite earning more than ever before. And honestly, this happens to a lot of adults in their late 20s and 30s. Because this is usually the stage where life becomes crowded financially. Rent increases. Relationships become serious. Family expectations grow. Career pressure intensifies. And social comparison becomes harder to ignore, especially online. Before social media, people mostly compared themselves to coworkers, neighbors, or relatives nearby. Now people compare themselves to thousands of carefully edited lifestyles every single day. You wake up and see someone your age buying a house, someone else traveling internationally, another person posting luxury dinners or designer shopping bags. Even if you know intellectually that social media is curated, emotionally, it still affects you. because human beings naturally measure themselves against other people, and money became one of the easiest ways to display status publicly. But here's the strange part. A person can look rich while quietly living under enormous financial pressure, and another person can appear completely ordinary while slowly building genuine stability. The first lifestyle just gets more attention. Because visible wealth is easier to admire than invisible discipline, nobody sees restraint. Nobody sees patience. Nobody sees the financial decisions that create peace 10 years later. And unfortunately, real wealth often feels boring at first. That's something people rarely talk about honestly. Building wealth usually looks repetitive. Saving consistently, avoiding unnecessary debt, living slightly below your means, investing slowly over long periods of time. None of that creates instant social validation. In fact, sometimes it creates the opposite. Sometimes people assume you're struggling because you're not constantly upgrading your lifestyle. That social pressure is powerful, especially when your environment rewards appearances heavily. I think this is why many high earners still feel trapped financially, because income alone doesn't create security. The gap between what you earn and what you spend matters more than most people realize. Someone earning a large salary but maintaining enormous monthly obligations may actually feel more stressed than someone earning less with lower financial pressure. Because freedom is not only about income. It's about flexibility, options, breathing room. And this is where the difference between looking rich and becoming wealthy becomes extremely clear. Looking rich is often about immediate emotional rewards. People notice. You feel validated. You feel successful today. But becoming wealthy usually requires tolerating delayed gratification. You build slowly, quietly, without much external recognition in the beginning. That's emotionally difficult for people because humans naturally crave immediate feedback. We want visible proof that our effort matters now. And consumer culture constantly encourages that mindset. You deserve it. Treat yourself. Upgrade your life. Again, none of these messages sound unreasonable individually, but repeated constantly over years, they can quietly shape financial behavior in destructive ways, especially emotional spending. And emotional spending is far more common than people admit. A lot of purchases are not really about the item itself. They're about stress relief, or insecurity, or exhaustion, or trying to feel accomplished after difficult days. Someone works long hours, feels emotionally drained, and buying something expensive creates temporary relief. For a moment, life feels rewarding again. That emotional cycle becomes dangerous because spending starts functioning like comfort, not financial strategy. Comfort. And when people are overwhelmed, lonely, anxious, or burned out, comfort spending becomes very easy to justify, especially if everyone around them is doing the same thing. That's another important part of this conversation. People normalize the financial habits surrounding them. If everyone in your social circle spends heavily, restraint starts feeling abnormal. If everyone upgrades constantly, simplicity can start feeling embarrassing. And social signaling quietly shapes decision-making more than most people realize. Even things like weddings, birthdays, vacations, or dining out often become performances of financial status. Not always intentionally, but socially. People want to feel respected. Nobody wants to appear behind in life. The problem is that maintaining appearances becomes expensive over time, not only financially, mentally too, because many lifestyles that appear luxurious are actually fragile. They depend on continuous income, continuous performance at work, continuous monthly payments. And the moment income becomes unstable, panic enters quickly. That's why financial security feels so different emotionally than financial appearance. Real security creates calm, not perfection, not endless luxury. Calm. The ability to handle emergencies without immediate fear. The ability to leave unhealthy situations without collapsing financially. The ability to rest occasionally without panic. That kind of stability changes daily life more than people expect. And interestingly, many genuinely wealthy people understand this deeply. That's why some wealthy individuals live far more modestly than people imagine. Because once someone experiences real financial breathing room, external validation often becomes less important. They stop needing every purchase to communicate success. They start valuing privacy, time, flexibility, and peace of mind. I think one of the most important financial shifts a person can make is realizing that visible success and actual stability are not the same thing. Because once you understand that, you start asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Can I make this payment every month?" you start asking, "What does this payment cost me emotionally over time? Does it increase pressure? Does it reduce flexibility? Does it force me to tolerate stressful situations longer? Does it make my future more fragile?" Those questions change financial behavior naturally, not through guilt, through awareness. And awareness matters because most people are not bad with money. They're emotionally human around money. There's a difference. A person who grew up financially insecure may spend emotionally because buying things feels psychologically connected to safety or progress. Someone who spent years struggling may overspend after finally earning decent money because they want proof that life improved. Someone dealing with stress may seek comfort through consumption because exhaustion weakens long-term thinking. These patterns deserve understanding, not shame. But understanding them is important because unconscious spending habits quietly shape decades of life outcomes. And honestly, many people don't truly want luxury as much as they think they do. What they really want is relief, stability, respect, control over their time, less anxiety. That's what people are actually chasing emotionally. The problem is that consumer culture often teaches people to pursue emotional security through visible consumption. But appearances can only do so much. At some point, more upgrades stop reducing anxiety. Sometimes they increase it. More bills, more pressure, more dependence on income, more fear of losing the lifestyle. This is why some people earning average incomes sleep better financially than people earning far more. Because financial peace and financial appearance are completely different experiences. And maybe that's the biggest misunderstanding around wealth. People think wealth is mostly about luxury. But often, real wealth is simply reduced vulnerability, reduced panic, reduced dependence, reduced financial stress. That version of wealth usually looks quieter, but it changes life profoundly. Imagine having enough savings to handle emergencies calmly. Imagine not feeling trapped at work because every bill depends on your next paycheck immediately. Imagine being able to make decisions based on long-term priorities instead of short-term survival pressure. That's meaningful, and it usually gets built slowly, which is why patience matters financially. Not because patience sounds wise, but because financial stability compounds quietly over time. And unfortunately, quiet progress rarely gets celebrated socially. That's why people sometimes feel behind while actually moving in the right direction. You may not look wealthy online, but you may be building something far more durable underneath the surface. And honestly, that matters more than most people realize. Because eventually, life tests everyone financially. Unexpected expenses happen. Jobs change. Economies shift. Health issues appear. And during difficult seasons, appearances stop matching very quickly. What matters then is resilience. Breathing room. Options. That's when invisible discipline suddenly becomes visible in its effects. I think one of the healthiest things a person can do is separate self-worth from visible lifestyle. Because once identity becomes tied to appearances, money decisions become emotionally distorted. Every downgrade feels humiliating. Every setback feels personal. Every purchase becomes loaded with psychological meaning. That's exhausting. You deserve a healthier relationship with money than that. One where money becomes a tool instead of a performance. One where your financial choices align with your actual priorities instead of invisible social pressure. And no, this doesn't mean never enjoying life. It doesn't mean rejecting ambition or avoiding nice things forever. The goal is not deprivation. It's intentionality. Buying things because they genuinely improve your life is very different from buying things mainly to manage perception. And sometimes that difference is uncomfortable to admit honestly. But once you start noticing it, your relationship with money changes. You become more protective of financial peace. You stop automatically upgrading every area of your life with every raise. You stop assuming everyone who looks successful is financially secure. And slowly, your definition of success becomes quieter, but stronger. Maybe success becomes lower anxiety, more flexibility, more ownership of your time. Maybe success becomes needing less validation from strangers. That version of success rarely goes viral online, but it creates something much more valuable internally. Peace. And maybe that's the real difference between looking rich and becoming wealthy. One is designed to impress people temporarily. The other is designed to support your life long term. One depends heavily on appearances. The other quietly creates freedom. And if you feel financially behind sometimes, I think it's important to remember this. A slower, quieter financial life is not failure. Choosing stability over status is not weakness. Building gradually is not falling behind. In many cases, it's the exact opposite. Because some of the most important financial progress happens privately. Quiet decisions, quiet discipline, quiet patience. And over enough years, those invisible choices become something incredibly valuable. Not just financially, emotionally too. A calmer life, a steadier life, a life where money stops feeling like a constant performance. And honestly, that kind of wealth matters more than most people realize. If you enjoyed this piece and got value, hit the subscribe button and like this video. It helps to push this video so others who want financial freedom can also benefit from this. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and if, at any point in your life, you have bought things you didn't truly need, but just for social gratification. I will see you in the next one.